Speaking of reports, we had a report come out a couple of days ago of Russell Wilson's frustration with his front office over there in Seattle, and it seems that all is not happy in the land of the 12th man. So, I mean, what's your take on that one? Because that definitely kind of came out of left field. I didn't think Russell would be on this rumor mill. Obviously, he's not as significant as Deshaun, but I mean, the fact that there's something circulating in Seattle leads me to believe that there's something more to this.
I think he's frustrated with the offense. I think he's even mentioned the fact that really the offensive scheme, really for the last couple of years, has been pretty identifiable to the defenses that they've been going up against. And I mean, we talked about when Brandon Marshall was talking about this topic yesterday about he thinks that Russell Wilson is handling this situation as classy as he can if he's actually trying to move on from Seattle. I don't really think that that's the case. I'm fully of the mindset that Russell Wilson intends and wants to stay in Seattle for a very long time, possibly the rest of his career. It's just that I think there are certain things that they're going to have to address moving forward. I do think to a certain extent that he is right about the offensive line issues. He has been sacked more than anybody in the last 9 years that he started in the league. So he does have he has a point there. But I will say this: there have been points in time during the regular season where he has not played up to snuff. Now, this past year, he started out on fire. However, when it got to the middle part, to the latter part of the season, he definitely took a dip. I remember he was at the top of the MVP discussion in the beginning of the year, and then he completely fell off the radar for the MVP by December. It was pretty much between Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, and then maybe Derrick Henry at that point. But Russell Wilson was nowhere to be found in that MVP discussion. So some of this is definitely on him. I can't absolve him of any wrongdoing here. He does need to step up some of his play. But I will say this: the offensive scheme that they have, I think they're going to have to make some tweaks and adjustments with this. I think when he first started in Seattle, they were predominantly based on running the football with Marshawn Lynch. Now that that era has completely gone to the wayside, they are now fully dependent and reliant on Russell Wilson to drive the offense, for all these games. And I think maybe adding some offensive linemen either by free agency this year or through the draft, I think that definitely helps them, and it helps the running backs too, because these running backs that Seattle has, they're solid running backs. I mean, they got Chris Carson back there. And I know they had Carlos Hyde at some points this year when he wasn't hurt. So they have some viable running backs here. And I think if they bolster that offensive line, they maybe make some adjustments um, in the offensive scheme. I think they'll be okay moving forward, but I don't see a scenario where he gets traded anytime soon. I don't think Seattle's front office has any intention of getting rid of him because I think by and large, I think the front office is pretty happy with him, other than maybe not getting the playoff production that they want out of him out of these last couple of years. But I see Russell Wilson staying there for a very long time. I don't see him getting moved. I think this is just kind of there's a little bit of frustration that needs to be addressed, but I don't think that this is going to be a long term issue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you to a certain extent. I think that the only way that Russell would be moved would be if these conversations that are publicly being discussed turn into arguments, turn into disagreements, and then turn into, well, if you don't like it here, then you can leave. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what it is, but typically when an athlete or a superstar tends to try to speak their mind and then it becomes public knowledge to the media, people tend to blow it out of proportion. Reports start to get twisted. It becomes a he said and she said kind of thing. And then within 2 weeks, we've seen players say, you know what, screw it, and flip the script and say, I want to get out of here. Carson Wentz throughout the season pretty much said, I don't want to go anywhere, got benched and said, I'm good, I'm good. And then within 2 weeks of Jalen starting 2 games, it became, well, now I want to get out of here. I know it's a different scenario, but in the terms of for the integrity of 14 straight weeks, we heard he's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. We're not trading him. And now it's like Carson Wentz is trending everywhere. And we'll get into him in just a moment. But this is how relationships shatter in the league is by bringing things to the media's attention. This could have been handled behind the scenes of him just saying, you know what? I'm tired of getting hit as much as I am. I'm tired of getting sacked. I'm tired of you guys spending all of this effort and money on the wrong places. And Brandon Marshall touched on it very well. In the last 9 years, they've only drafted one offensive lineman since Russell's been there. And they continue to try to kind of nitpick at free agent offensive linemen that don't end up panning out for whatever reason, whether that be injury, they're at the tail end of their career, or they just don't play up to snuff. But we already know in the NFC West alone, Russell's got to deal with Nick Bosa, Aaron Donald, and obviously, there's not really a pass rusher out there in Arizona
I got Chandler
anymore. It used
Jones. I got Chandler Jones out there.
Chandler Jones. Right. I'm sitting here. I knew there was one, but that's just an example of just one person on every individual team that he has to play 2 times a year. So what I'm getting at here is if Seattle's front office doesn't start making strides to actually please their superstar, I am on kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. I can see this being the divider between the two parties, and this could be the beginning of what could be the end of Russell's tenure in Seattle. That offensive line is pretty bad as it is, and like you said, if the offense continues to be as predictable or as uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, pre- I'm going blank in the middle of a live episode, and it's kind of frustrating. So if the offense does remain predictable, like you stated, I think that Russell's obviously going to have to continue to run for his life throughout the season because if corners and defensive coordinators can scheme for this offense, I think that makes it easier for a pass rush to get to him. And if he's got to continuously scramble, eventually, God forbid, an injury may occur, and that might motivate Russell even more to want to leave. So Brandon Marshall did make a good point. He said he was in the Seattle camp, and he said that the offense was kind of a predictable situation where it was kind of a run on first down, a run on second down, and then it was kind of like we got to go deep and take a shot. And if Brandon's saying that is public knowledge, I mean, like imagine what defensive coordinators and scouts are doing for a living. I mean, they're probably reading it. And Russell did throw, I'm pretty sure, 2 or 3 league high 3 interception games. Other
He had a couple this year. He had some
yeah.
pretty he had some pretty bad games where he was throwing multiple interceptions in those games.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I know I remember 2 specifically where he threw 3, and it was just like they were just atrocious. But um, yeah, like I said, I don't know, man. I think Russell, with everything going on this offseason with quarterbacks, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Russell were to say, "Yo, I'm tired of this shit. I got to get out of here. You're not listening to me, and you're not making moves that I need you to make for me. We got to change this up."
Let me make one more point about the whole Russell situation. I I don't want to say that it's even close to the situation that's going on in Houston between the Texans
No,
and Deshaun Watson. It is nowhere near that. So
no,
I do think that, like, compared to that situation, the situation in Seattle is far more manageable. And I think, to me, just gonna have to sit and wait and kind of see what happens over the next couple of months. Obviously, they could bring in some free agents. Obviously, they could address the situation with the offensive line in the draft. I think as far as the skill position goes, I think they're actually fine. They may add, they could add a tight end. I know they had Jacob Hollister there this year, but they could make an upgrade at that tight end position as well. At least kind of throw a little bit of a different wrench into the offense, just instead of solely relying on Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf all the time to throw to. So there are some things that Seattle can definitely change on the offense here, and maybe even improve the defense, just because that defense, it can be pretty suspect, and they have a tendency to give up a lot of points, and it would take a lot of pressure off of Russell Wilson's back if he actually has a somewhat reliable defense. And I think a lot of the issues that may stem from Russell Wilson's mindset is that he may be doing too much here, where he has to do too much of the carrying, and the defense isn't doing enough. So I think there may be a situation where maybe this is like his way of saying, okay, obviously I'm one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but I can't do this. I can't do 75% of the heavy lifting here. We're
yeah.
gonna have to address some of these issues here. I think bolstering the defense too would definitely help the situation as well, just because that defense, if if they're not up, it's very difficult for that defense to really stay put, as far as you know giving Seattle's offense the motivation to go out there and get points. Just because if that defense is constantly giving up points, that means the offense has to match what the defense is giving up possession to possession. So I don't know. I think that this situation, like I said, is not that bad compared to Houston.
No.
But do I rule out the possibility that it could go downhill? Yeah. But I'll say this: it, if things were to get really bad in Seattle, they would fire Pete Carroll first before they get rid of Russell Wilson. I would see that
I'm
first.
I'm definitely not denying that, but at the end of the day, that's definitely not a Pete Carroll call. That's definitely a GM kind of thing of bringing personnel. Pete Carroll has a say in the play calling and the scheme that the offense is running, but protection, I genuinely don't believe that's kind of a thing that Pete Carroll can necessarily control. If it came down to a choice of Pete Carroll or Russell, obviously, and any organization is going to make a choice and choose their franchise quarterback because a coach can be replaceable. Although Pete Carroll's success since he's been in the NFL has gotten this team to appear in two Super Bowls with a Super Bowl victory, and obviously he'll forever be scrutinized for the decision to throw the ball on the 1 yard line. But other than that, they're a consistent playoff team. Russell Wilson's playing at a very high level for the most part for the majority of the season. So I I definitely agree that they would let Pete go, but I don't think that it's going to come down to a head coach or a quarterback. That's definitely more of a GM slash front office decision of, all right, are we going to help him or are we going to continue to do what we want to do?
Yeah, it's just recently though I mean, don't get me wrong, they are definitely a playoff team and they're definitely a contending team in the NFC. They just haven't lived up to that Super Bowl pedigree ever since that loss to the Patriots in Super Bowl 49. And I'll say this, like when it came to that group of guys that was with Pete Carroll, I'm talking about the Legion of Boom here. That whole team, after that Super Bowl loss, that team was never the same. And I think the idea creeped in that there was definitely some mistrust between some of the players and Pete Carroll's decision making because look, you had a chance to win back-to-back Super Bowls and you were literally 1 yard away from doing it and you end up throwing on a second down or a third, I think it was a second down play, to Ricardo Lockett for a game-winning touchdown, and it ends up getting picked off when you had Marshawn Lynch. You could have just ran it in. So I think I think some of that still kind of I think there's somewhat of that element still there. I don't know to what degree it is, but I'll just say this. I get this sense that Pete Carroll may only have a couple years left there if they don't do anything significant moving forward. I mean, you got a really good quarterback in Russell Wilson, and this team has Super Bowl aspirations, but they have not lived up to those aspirations in about 5 or 6 years. So, I mean, if it gets to a point where the front office doesn't feel like Pete Carroll is getting this team to where it should be, it wouldn't surprise me if they get rid of him in a couple of years from now. But obviously, I don't want to get too far ahead of the situation in Seattle. It's just we kind of have to see how these things turn out. We have to kind of see how this offseason goes for Seattle first.